Can you drive slower? I looked at her in the mirror. We'd been on the road 4 minutes. She was a bride in a white dress in the back of my car, and we had 34 minutes to get to her own wedding. Slower, I said. Yes. Ma'am, we're doing 40 in a 55. I know. So I dropped to 35. She said thank you, folded her hands in her lap, and looked out the window at a stretch of road that has nothing on it. Corn. A fence. A barn that fell down when I was in high school, and nobody ever cleared. She looked at it like it was the ocean. I've driven brides for 11 years. Every single one of them has asked me to go faster. Every single one. They check their phones. They ask if there's a shortcut. One of them offered me $100 for every red light I ran. And she was joking, but she wasn't entirely joking. Nobody asks me to go slower. 4 miles on, she said it again. Can you slow down a little more? And I said it like a man who was going to get paid either way. Miss Brandt, is everything all right? She met my eyes in the mirror. Do you know how many people are in that church? No. 206. I counted them last night. I couldn't sleep, so I counted them. Then she said the thing that made me take my foot off the gas completely. In about half an hour, I have to stand in front of 206 people and lie to every one of them. My name's Ray. I'm 46, and I own exactly one car for hire. A 1968 Lincoln. Black. A backseat you could hold a meeting in. Doyle Car Service, Alden, Michigan. Weddings, proms, funerals in the winter. I have one rule, and I've kept it for 11 years. Whatever happens in the back of that car does not exist once the passenger gets out. I don't ask, I don't repeat, I don't get involved. 29 minutes later, I was standing on the gravel of Ridge Road, telling a stranger in a wedding dress about the worst 9 years of my life. But first I asked her the obvious question. Lie about what? She didn't answer right away. She reached up and touched the back of her own neck, the way people do when they're deciding whether to say a thing out loud for the first time. I'm going to say I love him, in front of everybody, and I'm going to mean about half of it, and the half I mean isn't the half that counts. I said the obvious thing, then don't. She laughed. One breath, no joy in it. You don't know what you're saying. Probably not. Do you know Grant Weller? Everybody in Alden knows Grant Weller. He owns the pharmacy on Fulton Street, the only one between us and Cadillac. 41 years old. He sponsors a girls' softball team that has never won anything. If you'd asked me that morning to name a decent man in that town, I'd have said Grant, and I wouldn't have had to think about it first. I know Grant. Then you know he's a good man. I do. So did I, she said. That was the problem. That's the whole problem. We passed the county line. 26 minutes. You picked me up at Lakeview this morning. I did. A memory care facility. 40 minutes north. A bride in a full dress standing in a nursing home lobby at 1:10, holding a paper cup of coffee she never drank. I'd wondered. I hadn't asked. My mother's there. She's 63. Early onset Alzheimer's, 4 years now. She didn't know it was my wedding day this morning. I put the dress on in her room, and she asked me if I was a nurse. There isn't anything to say to that, so I didn't. Lakeview is $6,400 a month, Hannah said. I'm a school administrator. I make $51,000 a year. And then I understood, and I wished I didn't. Grant pays it. 2 years and 4 months. He has never once mentioned it to me. Not in an argument, not as a joke, not to be kind. He set up a transfer and he never brought it up again. Which left exactly one question worth asking, and I was afraid of the answer. If you're still here, and I know this is where people decide whether they want the rest of it, do me one favor. Subscribe. Because what she told me in the next 9 minutes changed how I think about my own marriage, and I'd rather tell it to people who stayed. Now, the question I was afraid to ask. Here's what I wanted to say. So he bought you. Because that's the easy version. That's the version where somebody's a villain, and you know where to stand. I didn't say it, because it was obvious even to me that it wasn't true. If Grant Weller wanted to buy a wife, he'd have mentioned the bill. So I said, does he know? She went very quiet. Miss Brandt, does he know you don't? Hannah. Does he know? Hannah. 19 minutes. She was looking at the back of my head in the mirror, and I have thought about her face at that moment probably 1,000 times since. He knows. I nearly stopped the car. He told me, in February, we were in his kitchen, and he was making eggs, and he said, she stopped, got it under control, started again. He said, I know I'm not it for you. I know what you settled for. I'd rather have this than not have you. And you said? I said that wasn't true, which was the first lie, and he let me have it, because that's what he does. He lets me have things. 15 minutes. The church spire came up over the hill on Ridge Road, and I could see it, and she could see me seeing it. He's 41 years old, she said, and he's going to stand up there today knowing exactly what he's getting, and he's decided it's enough. And in 15 minutes, I'm going to let him. And that is the sentence that made me pull the car over. Not because I'm brave, because I'd heard it before, from the other side of it, in my own kitchen, 11 years ago. I married Maren Lowell when I was 26, 9 years, no children. We tried for 4 of them and then stopped talking about it, which is its own kind of ending. And I knew. That's the thing. I knew by about year 2. There's a particular way somebody looks at you when they're being kind instead of being in love. It's very close. From the outside you can't tell, and honestly, most days from the inside you can't either. But there's a half second when they don't know you're watching, and their face does nothing at all. I saw it for 7 years and I decided I could live on it. She wasn't cruel to me. Not once. She never raised her voice, never left me anywhere, came to my uncle's funeral and held my hand for 3 hours. Ask anybody in Alden and they'd have said we were fine. We were fine the way a house is fine, right up until somebody opens the wall. She told me on a Tuesday. She said, Ray, I've been trying to be enough for you for 9 years, and I can't do it anymore. And I'm not doing it because you're bad. I'm doing it because you never asked me for the truth. Not once in 9 years. I needed you to ask. She left in November. She lives in Grand Rapids now. She's married, and by every account I have, she is very happy, and I'm glad. It took me 6 years to be able to say that without something happening in my chest. My uncle died that same winter and left me the Lincoln, and I took the keys, because taking the keys was easier than deciding what to do with the rest of my life. 11 years I'd said nothing to anybody about any of it. I had 9 minutes. I pulled onto the gravel, put it in park, and turned around in my seat so I was looking at her properly, not through a mirror. Hannah, I'm going to break a rule. You can tell me to drive and I'll drive. She didn't say anything, so I told her about Maren. The short version, the half second in the face, 7 years living on it, the Tuesday. When I finished, she said, Why are you telling me this? Because he said he'd rather have this than not have you, and I believe he means it today. He does mean it. I meant it too. I was gripping the seat back, I noticed later. I meant it for 7 years. And then? And then it ran out. Not because she stopped being good to me. Because one morning I caught her looking at nothing, and after that I couldn't stop seeing it. And then I had to decide whether to spend 30 years pretending I hadn't. I let that sit. That's not a marriage, Hannah. I've been in that room. It's a very long room. I don't have a choice, she said. My mother. I know. $6,400 a month, Ray. I know, and I'm not telling you what to do. I want that clear, because I've asked myself since whether I was. I'm telling you what he doesn't know. What doesn't he know? He thinks he's choosing between you and nothing. Nobody's told him there's a third thing. What third thing? Being asked for the truth, I said. Maren waited 9 years for me to ask her. I never did. She had to say it herself, and it cost her everything, and it should have cost me instead. 7 minutes. She was quiet for 4 of them, and I let her be, and I have never in my life wanted so badly to fill a silence. Then she pulled the veil back off her face. Drive me to the side entrance, not the front. The side. He gets there an hour early. He's always an hour early. He'll be in the little room behind the sanctuary with his brother. She already had her shoes in her hand. I need 11 minutes with him before anybody sees me. I don't know what was said in that room. I want to say that plainly because I've told this story a few times now, and every time, somebody tries to get me to fill it in, and I won't. Here's what I know. She went in at 1:52 with her shoes in her hand. I sat in that car for 27 minutes. I want you to understand what that was like, because it's the only part of this I'd change. I could hear the organ. Somebody had propped the front doors open because it was warm, and a hymn was going. And at one point I heard 200 people laugh at something. That low church laugh people do when the minister makes a joke before the real thing starts. And I sat there in a gray suit in a 1968 Lincoln and thought, you have just talked a woman out of the only thing keeping her mother in a bed. I had her deposit check in my jacket pocket. I remember taking it out and looking at it. I don't know why. At 2:19, Grant Weller's brother came out of the side door and walked the whole length of the building to the front and went inside. About 90 seconds later, 206 people came out of a church. Not crying, that's what I remember. Confused, mostly. A lot of people standing on a lawn in good clothes, looking at each other. At 2:40, Grant came out, and he came straight for my car, and I got out, because you get out, and I thought, genuinely, that he was going to hit me. I'd have let him? He put out his hand. She told me you talked to her. I said yes. She asked me whether I'd rather be enough, or be told the truth. He'd been crying, and he was completely calm. Nobody has ever asked me a question like that. I've been the reasonable one my whole life. Everybody assumes I've already made peace with whatever it is. I didn't know what to say to that. I called it off. Not her, me. I want that to be what people say in this town. Then, and I'm still paying for Diane. That was never a trade. If she thought it was a trade, then I did something wrong. He shook my hand and walked back into the church. And I sat in my car in a church parking lot and understood that I had just done for a stranger, in 34 minutes, what nobody had ever done for me. That was 2 years ago in May. Grant sold the pharmacy in the spring and moved to Ann Arbor. Last I heard, he's seeing somebody. And Hannah says she's glad about it in a way it took her about a year to be able to say. Diane died in February. Grant paid Lakeview until the final month. Hannah tried to stop him twice, and he wouldn't discuss it. And Hannah called me 18 months after that drive, because she needed a car for her mother's funeral, and Doyle Car Service is the only one in Alden. So that's not a story. That's arithmetic. But she didn't book by check. She called the number and asked for me by name. And she said, "I don't want a driver, Ray. I want you to sit in the third row and then drive me home." So I did that. We've had dinner 4 times. That's all. She's 34 and I'm 46. And I was the man in the front seat on the worst afternoon of her life. And neither of us has any interest in pretending that isn't complicated. Last month she asked me a question in the car. My car. Parked outside her house, engine off, because that is apparently where we do this. She said, "Ray, am I enough?" And I said no. I said that's the wrong question. That's Grant's question, and it's the one that ate 9 years of my life from the other side. Ask me the real one. What's the real one? Ask me for the truth, any day you want it. That's the only thing I have that Marin never got. She's asked me twice since. I told her the truth both times. Both times it was harder than I expected. Both times she stayed. That's not an ending, I know that. But I drove a woman to her own wedding at 35 miles an hour, and I've thought about it every day since, and I've stopped believing she was stalling. I think she was waiting for somebody to ask her one question before she got there. And I think if nobody had, she'd have walked in and said the words. One last thing. I broke my rule that day. 11 years of keeping my mouth shut in that car, and I pulled over on Ridge Road and told a stranger about my marriage 9 minutes before her wedding. I still don't know if I had the right. She was a paying customer. It wasn't my business. So tell me in the comments. Was I right to say it, or should I have driven her to the door and kept quiet? I have genuinely never settled it. And if this one stayed with you, subscribe. There's a new story every week, and every one of them is about somebody who almost asked the question and then didn't. Thank you for riding with me.